Now let's continue our analysis of the gathering storm of insecurity here in Nigeria, where every day doubts grow about the ability of the government to get on top of this withering crisis. Distressing events are daily taking place here. Just today, we heard of the abduction of 4 Catholic nuns in Imo State in the southeast and another group of 6 people in Katsina in the northwest. The Reverend Sisters are just a few among many Christian clergy and church worshippers, as well as scores of Muslims who've been recently kidnapped or killed in Nigeria. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the theologian, human rights and good governance activist, anti-poverty campaigner, Father George Ehusani, who's also the executive director of the Lux Terra Leadership Foundation here in Abuja, in addition to being a prolific author. Thank you very much indeed, Father, for coming in.
Thank you, Charles.
Let's start with this latest attack on nuns here in Nigeria. Why are Catholic clergy being targeted or appear to be targeted?
I don't understand. There appears to have been an increase in attacks on clergy, perhaps after the Methodist Bishop was kidnapped, and perhaps within 48 hours, 100 million naira was paid. So there might be that impression that religious people have a lot of money, and that's my guess. But there has been a disproportionate attack on Christian clergy and Catholic clergy particularly. You just heard this morning of 4 Reverend Sisters around Okigwe kidnapped, and quite a few of them have been killed. Sokoto Diocese and Edo, Auchi Diocese, and so on. Very, very unfortunate, very sad development, because, and I tell you, one of the reasons perhaps why we are so vulnerable. We have the Catholic Church in practically every village in Nigeria, and Catholic priests live with their people. They don't live in the city and go to the village, they live with their people. So, and we have convents, people taking care of orphans, taking care of little children, of sick people, nurses, and so on. They are in the villages where they are working, and they don't have police escorts. They don't have security. They rely on government to protect them, and now government is failing. So, one reason why there is a disproportionate number of Catholic clergy being kidnapped is that Catholic clergy live with the people in the remote areas, in rather vulnerable areas. The priest of my diocese that was kidnapped, for example, lives at one outskirt, very close to the bush, and no protection of any sort. He just relies on God and relies on government to protect him, but government is failing big time.
Given that, I mean, do you feel frustrated and helpless by this insecurity?
It is distressing, to say the least. It is distressing. I was sharing with someone earlier that shouldn't we get human rights lawyers to help us? That if a government that went into government with the promise to take care primarily of the lives and properties of Nigerians, if those Nigerians now are being kidnapped and being killed recklessly, shouldn't the victims demand that if, for example, 10 million, 20 million is extorted from us, shouldn't we get the government to pay back that money? If it is the government's responsibility to protect the lives and properties of the people, #1 responsibility of government. Now, if repeatedly government keeps failing in doing that, then I believe, and I'm going to perhaps call Femi Falana and other senior lawyers to discuss this matter. Can't we make this justiciable? Meaning, let the people who are victims that are made to pay 10 million, 5 million, 20 million, that money should be refunded by government, because it's actually dereliction of duty, failure to carry out. This is not it's not, what do they call it in insurance, act of God. It's not act of, if there is a thunder thunderstorm and whatever happens to your building, the insurance can say, oh, it's an act of God. That was not part of it. However, this is not an act of God, because many people know that our security agencies, they are able to take care of this. I mean, people said that there were 44 DSS 44 intelligence reports to government before the Kuje prison attack, and yet it happened successfully. Somebody is not doing what he's supposed to do, and somebody should go in for it. Somebody should pay for it. It shouldn't be the victims. Otherwise, it is so distressing that I don't know how to preach hope for the people anymore.
Is that the kind of recommendation? I mean, we've got elections coming up and a new government coming in sort of next year. Is that the sort of recommendation that you make to them, for them to take that kind of responsibility over insecurity? Yes,
within the context of saying goodbye to impunity. How can you have such failure in governance and nobody resigns? Nobody is whose appointment is terminated. Everybody carries on business as usual. How can you, let's move to education, for example. How can you have a situation where universities are on strike for 6 months? Minister walks out on students. Minister does not succeed in negotiating, and the minister keeps sitting down there as minister. What justifies our remaining in power if what we are there for is not working? What justifies our remaining in power? So Nigerians must, as we move towards 2023 elections, Nigerians must be educated. We must all be part of educating Nigerians on what governance is all about, and what are the fundamental principles of government, and then what is the social contract between the people and their government. When there is a failure in one party to keep the terms of the contract, aren't there sanctions? And there are supposed to be sanctions, and there are supposed to be repercussions when one party to the social contract fails. For the last 7 years, there has been major failure in the social contract between the Nigerian government and the Nigerian people. In the last few months, I mean, like you mentioned, my colleagues have been kidnapped left, right, and center. And we have not had a case. We have hardly had a case where they said, oh, thank God it is the police that fished the bandits out and got me freed. Now, in almost every case, the people are left to their own resources, to their own devices, and that is distressing. And we cannot continue like this for much longer. And that leads us logically to politics, which you've already touched on there, and the various shades of it as 2023 approaches. We're hearing words of burning reproach, people like yourself and many others in society, against what many see as a corrupt political order that's stolen away everything. Do you see signs of change in 2023 as it approaches? Our hope for change will be the young people. I see right now some groundswell of movement, some movement similar to the NSAS movement, that heralds a major change in the political configuration of this country, in the governance configuration. Well, when you have a system that devours its own people, when you have, they say, nature cannot for long sustain a situation where a predator continues to devour those that it requires for its own sustenance. What happens is that in the course of evolution, that predator is taken out so that there can be equilibrium, there can be some measure of balance. I see a situation where those our autochthonous conquerors, our native conquerors, have pushed Nigerians to the wall. I believe we have reached the end of the road, and Nigerians are going to begin to say, you no more. We need something different. We need a new kind of, a new set of human beings, a new set of politicians. We don't want professional politicians. We actually do not want people who must rule, who have such towering ambition to rule, not because they have what it takes, but to satisfy their individual ambition. And we are seeing them go all over the place. Individual ambition to become president, to become governor. We need a mechanic now. We need an engineer. Our vehicle is knocking, is collapsing. We need somebody who has the technical know-how with the courage to take us out of the mess we are in, not some feudal lord who has an ambition to be president or to be governor or local government chairman.
And are you seeing anyone like that?
Well, there are a few people coming up. And what I would encourage is young people to open their eyes, shine their eyes, as they say in Nigeria, and watch out for the few here and there who are not desperate political, desperate professional politicians, but people who are offering to serve in order to get out of the mess.
And I mean, we've heard you there, as well as a lot of others, a lot about the passionate conviction of the youth, which I think you captured very well there. I mean, you work closely with many of them, young crusaders who want to believe and appear to have convinced themselves that they've found or are in the process of finding presidential candidates who they think will lead them to the promised land. But is it faith that they have, or is it longing, which is a very different thing?
Oh, both. There is a deep-seated longing, born out of long-standing frustration, born out of almost despair. Young people have carried a burden that is too heavy for them. And so when they see any flicker of hope, they hold on to it. And this is what we are seeing in the groundswell. And I believe they also have faith. I mean, faith as against a situation of hopelessness. They also have some faith that if we work together, if we make the necessary sacrifice, then we can win. Where we are now is a make or mar situation. We either work towards making Nigeria, or we would have no Nigeria. That is where we are now. I mean, a situation where bandits and kidnappers have taken up swaths of territory in this country. We know where they are, they say. We know where they are, but we can't touch them. That is an unacceptable situation. And no society can survive for long under that kind of situation, where people are paying taxes to bandits in order to go to farm. And actually, a lot of people are no longer able to go to farm. And in the next few months, few years, we may really have famine because farmers can no longer go to farm.
So when you look at all this, I mean, you are, of course, an author, you're a philosopher, you're a theologian. So in a sense, you're one of those people that have been described as unacknowledged legislators of society. Is this a crusade then that you're seeing heading towards 2023, a rising up of people much more powerful in reality than the politicians ordering them to do their bidding or vote the way that they're likely to vote? In other words, this is a crusade, and people are more encouraged because they think that they've realized their power and their potential, and with proper elections, they can make a difference.
Yes. Before now, Nigerians saw, a lot of elite Nigerians, young elite, saw politics as a dirty game. And indeed, the way politics was practiced in this country, it was a dirty game. I mean, politicians meet at this time of the day, make a resolution, take a decision, and then the next morning you hear something else because some group have met at 2 a.m. Some nocturnal meeting, and they have changed it. Then we see in broad daylight bags of money, naira and dollars, being exchanged for people's votes, delegates' votes, and so on and so forth. I mean, some jokes are going around that you really want to be a rich Nigerian, become a delegate. Now, that's not the kind of, that's undesirable. That's not the kind of politics that young people want. So we do have a crop of young people, especially those that are educated, who are saying enough of that mess. However, we must be realistic that those that the politicians have kept in ignorance, those that they have kept uneducated, there are quite a lot of millions. There are some 10 to 15 million unschooled Nigerian young people. Now, what are we going to do to reach those unschooled Nigerian people? Because these are the kind of people that the politicians exploit in order to remain in power. And in fact, we are beginning to see that it is deliberate to keep them uneducated, to keep them ignorant, so that you can keep oppressing them. Now, the responsibility of the young Nigerian champion of change is to go out there to meet with these uneducated Nigerians and tell them that it is in their interest to shift ground, not to continue to be pawns at the hands of these professional politicians.
Right. So are you reasonably encouraged by what you've seen? Is 2023 likely to be the twilight of the old political guard and a path to the new?
Yeah, we seem to be at a very critical point. And a lot can happen in the next 6 months. I am encouraged that there is, just watching the number of young Nigerians that went to register to vote, I hope that their cards will be out. Their PVC will be out. Just witnessing that, I have not witnessed that in my lifetime. I have not witnessed this quantum. In fact, I will find out from INEC, perhaps we have gotten double number of Nigerian registered voters in the last 3 months alone. Had doubled the number we had. I'm told we had about 56 million before, but we're heading towards 100 million now. That is very encouraging. That's about democracy. A government of the people. If you have 100 out of 200 million people, if you have 100 voters. But before we had only about 56.
Yeah.
And out of that
I think 56, they said there were 80-something million. And now they've added another 10.
Yeah, so we're heading towards 100. But a situation where we claim to have 20 million, 22 million people in Lagos, and less than 1 million people used to vote, that is deplorable. So now we are going to see perhaps 5, 6, 7 million people in Lagos voting. And the people who are voting in Lagos are often enlightened voters. Whereas the people who used to form the bulk of voters in this country were people who are told, this is where you vote, this is for whom you vote, and they just go like sheep. Now, we are talking about another kind of democracy where the people who vote, it will be one man, one vote, and so the wife of a man can decide to vote against her husband and vote for another candidate, because otherwise it is not democracy.
Right. Father, it is always brilliant talking with you and sharing your analysis of Nigerian society with our viewers. Father George Ehusani is a theologian, human rights and good governance activist, anti-poverty campaigner, and the executive director of the Lux Terra Leadership Foundation here in Abuja.
Thank you,
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Charles.